Our politics never unfold at a slow pace, I can tell you that much. Now, as the EFF gears up for its People's Assembly next month, contestation in the party is in overdrive. Following the departure of senior members like Dalimpofu, Floyd Shivambu, it appears another founding senior member has a doubtful future in the party. Weekend reports suggest that Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi might be next to leave the party after it was alleged he's been disbarred from challenging for Shivambu's vacant seat. And speaking of deputies, the ANC's number 2 is also reportedly under strain as questions abound about a fake affidavit he submitted under oath. To help us make sense of these political storms and their broader implications, we're joined now by Associate Political Editor at EWN, Tshidi Madia, who really is as good as they come to break it down for us. Tshidi, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Shivambu gone, Mpofu gone. Is Ndlozi next?
Good morning, Bongani. It seems that way, doesn't it? I mean, what you are watching and what you're seeing and what you're hearing, I think daggers is how some people have defined it. But I think there's a push and pull and almost a way to push him out of the party. That's kind of what you're seeing, where there's constant talk about Ndlozi on social media. The difficulty with EFF, and I've always said this, is that EFF members are really afraid to speak to the media. They're afraid of the consequences of being seen to speak to the media. But EFF members are really good at finding ways to communicate via social media. And so when you look at what's happening around Ndlozi, you can see that there are the telling signs. And of course, there have been the comments from the leader of the EFF himself about the one who sings beautifully, your favorite, and the question marks and the trust deficit that seemingly has developed between the organization and Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. And I think that the closer they get to their third National People's Assembly, the harder it is for somebody like Mbuyiseni to remain in the room. Some will say to you that this is an attempt to frustrate him, to get him to leave, as opposed to just expelling him from the party, because then the question of reasons comes up. What would be the reasons on paper to try and expel somebody like Mbuyiseni? Or is it easier to frustrate him and get him to go?
Tshidi,
that's kind of where I think they are at the moment.
One of the questions I'm asking this morning is the EFF a democratic party or a political cult? And I'll tell you why. Goldrich Gadi, for example, who's now looking like he's making a comeback, was once tossed aside. We've seen other leaders parachuted into high positions with no votes cast for them and just as quickly leave. How do you answer it?
I think you answered the question for yourself, haven't you? I think when it comes to internal democracy, there is no party in our country that I think practices as well as the ANC. I've seen people in the ANC take on the president of the ANC without worrying about consequences. You don't see that in a party like the EFF. Goderich Gadi is interesting. He's not the only one who's said to make a comeback, by the way. Leanne Matthys was also once a top official in the EFF. There's a thing called a lineup, Bongani, that people will tell you has been released, where the line of march has been given to provincial leaders about what needs to happen. In 2019, I was largely criticized for writing a piece called Amapiano versus Matorekisi, the Battle of the Bands. It was ahead of the EFF's conference. And what I was explaining is that there were factions, but the faction that will dominate is one that will come from the EFF leader, what he wants, and this lineup will be exactly what's elected. And the conference played out exactly as I said it would. So we've seen the lineup, we've seen the slate that should return. It's got Goderich Gadi, as you said, now set to become the deputy president. There is an argument about the reasons why he'd be ideal. I think the EFF hasn't done a good enough job over its years of existence in building up leaders, if you may. We don't know the politicians in the EFF. You know Julius Malema, you knew Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, you knew Floyd Shivambu, you knew Dali.
Yeah.
2 are gone. 1 might be on his way out. What do? They've got this challenge of putting up leaders that are known.
All right.
And so Goderich feels like a safe choice, if you may. When people view somebody like Mbuyiseni as a threat to Malema's leadership. You've got somebody like Leanne Matthys, again. She's on the lineup. She had left before. One can make an argument, I think, with Leanne Matthys that she's been working quite hard in the communication space for the party to earn her space back. But the truth of the matter is, a lineup has been sent to provincial leaders. They've been told to tell their delegates who are coming to conference, this is how the party will move.
What can a podcast do for you is a question I might ask, hey? Naughtily, Tshidi. All right. I wonder how much a collapse or at least a dysfunction in the EFF is good news for the Mkhonto weSizwe party. But let's move on to our other story very quickly. Deputy President Paul Mashatile now under fire, not only for his own personal challenges with the law related to money through his associates and his family, but also from the weekend reporting, this time for perjury and fraud. Can you explain the specifics of those allegations?
So, but before I touch on Paul, I just very quickly want to say the MK party is not going to stop shopping and lobbying across political parties, specifically the EFF. I've spoken to people in the EFF who are waiting to see what happens with the conference. Do they make it into that 14-member central command team, or do they leave? Floyd Shivambu is definitely lobbying in the EFF, so you must watch that space. Moving on to Paul Mashatile, I'm not surprised by this because I remember the story so well. There was a period where he was playing multiple roles in the ANC. He was Treasurer General. He then filled in Ace Makashila's position as Secretary General. And of course, with the unfortunate passing of Jesse Duarte, he also became the DSG. So he was called I think they called him the Holy Trinity at the time. He then went to court because he needed the Northwest to endorse his campaign to become deputy president. He then supported a faction that was pushing for a conference, and he submitted to court papers that an NEC meeting had taken place, and a decision about the structure in the Northwest had been approved. But when those those Northwest members did the digging, because I remember getting calls from them saying, "Did you ever report on an NEC meeting at this instance?" I looked back and there was no such meeting, and they said Paul Mashatile has made a submission to the courts with minutes of a meeting that did not take place. So that's where this perjury charge comes from. He did lie. He did admit that he did lie. This was part of his pursuit to become deputy president. I'm a little bit surprised that it's taken this long to come back to bite him, if you may. It'll be very interesting to see where it goes, but I'm not surprised because I remember that story very well, stemming from that run-up to the NC conference in 2022.
The drama continues. Tshidi Madia, appreciate your time as always, our EWN Politics Associate Editor.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions,
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.